وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة لعلكم تشكرون. ألم يروا إلى الطير مسخرات في جو السماء ما يمسكهن إلا الله إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يؤمنون. والله جعل لكم من بيوتكم سكنا وجعل لكم من جلود الأنعام بيوتا تستخفونها يوم ظعنكم ويوم إقامتكم ومن أصوافها وأوبارها وأشعارها أثاثا ومتاعا إلى حين. والله جعل لكم مما خلق ظلالا وجعل لكم من الجبال أكنانا وجعل لكم سرابيل تقيكم الحر وسرابيل تقيكم بأسكم كذلك يتم نعمته عليكم لعلكم تسلمون.
صدق الله العظيم. نحيطكم علما بأن جلسات الملتقى ستبث مباشرة على قناة هيئة التخصصات الصحية في اليوتيوب. أما الآن نعرض لكم فيلم الافتتاح.
تعيش المملكة العربية السعودية حالة حراك تطويرية كبيرة تسعى من خلالها مؤسسات الدولة إلى إنفاذ مبادرات برنامج التحول الوطني 2020 وتحقيق أهداف ورؤية المملكة 2030 التي تركز في جانبها الصحي على توفير الطب الوقائي للمواطنين ورفع درجة التنسيق بين خدمات الرعاية الصحية والرعاية الاجتماعية لتحقيق التكامل في تلبية متطلبات المستفيدين منها واحتياجاتهم، وذلك من خلال إنجاز سلسلة من المبادرات بلغ عددها أكثر من 40 مبادرة.
أنا أعتقد الهيئة هي يمكن أحد أهم منجزات الصحة في بلادنا. هؤلاء العظماء الذين أنشأوا الهيئة، الذين قادوها في أوائل مراحلها، الذين يعني حموها من أشياء كثيرة جدا حتى وصلت إلى ما وصلت إليه الآن. الهيئة منجز إقليمي، منجز على مستوى حقيقة الشرق الأوسط. لا يوجد في المنطقة زمالة أو بورد أو شهادة اختصاص مثل البورد السعودي. لا يوجد مؤسسة تقوم برعاية الممارسين الصحيين حقيقة مثل الهيئة هنا. ففخور جدا جدا هذا اليوم.
وانسجاما مع تلك الجهود الوطنية الجبارة تتطلع المحطة العلمية الأهم للكوادر الصحية في المملكة الهيئة السعودية للتخصصات الصحية بتنظيمها هذا الملتقى إلى تأكيد مبادئ التعاون وتعزيز الشراكة مع كافة القطاعات المعنية لتحقيق أهدافها المرسومة في خطتها الاستراتيجية من خلال محاور التغيير المعتمدة فيها لتصل إلى أعلى معايير الجودة وتفتح آفاقا جديدة نحو تطوير الأداء المهني والصحي ورفع كفاءة الكوادر الصحية حيث يعد من أهم أسس هذه الخطة تحسين جودة التدريب التي تعتمد على تحسين وترقية الاعتماد والمعايير.
عاصرت الاعتماد في الهيئة خلال الفترتين الماضية والحالية. الفترة الأولى كان الاعتماد يعمل عن طريق المجالس العلمية واللجان المنبثقة منه، وكانت تعتمد بشكل كبير على خبرة هؤلاء الأعضاء إذا كانوا أعضاء اللجان الزائرة أو أعضاء المجالس العلمية. لم تكن هناك معايير ثابتة لأي من البرامج أو المراكز، عدا يمكن 2 أو 3 من المراكز كان عندهم بعض المعايير التي يقومون عليها خلال الزيارات. الفترة الثانية وهي الفترة الحالية، واعتبر أنها كانت قفزة كبيرة في الاعتماد لوجود إدارة خاصة بالاعتماد وتكوين اللجنة المركزية للاعتماد، والتي قامت باستحداث وعمل معايير لكل البرامج موازية للمعايير العالمية. كذلك قامت اللجنة المركزية باستقطاب عدد كبير من الممارسين الصحيين ليكونوا مقيمين لهذه البرامج بعد تأهيلهم من خلال عمل ورش عمل لهم بصورة سنوية أو مرتين في السنة. كانت بداياتها بالتعاون مع الكلية الملكية للأطباء والجراحين في كندا.
تنظم الهيئة السعودية للتخصصات الصحية ممثلة بإدارة الاعتماد الملتقى السنوي الأول للاعتماد في 3 مدن من مدن المملكة، في الرياض وفي الدمام وفي جدة، الفترة بين 18 إلى 22 فبراير. يحتوي الملتقى على سبيل المثال الاعتماد العالمي ومعايير الاعتماد العالمي، الاعتماد المحلي ومعايير الاعتماد المحلي والتجربة العالمية مقارنة بالتجربة المحلية. يحتوي الملتقى على عدة محاور وأيضا عدة ورش عمل، منها يمكن 3 أو 4 ورش عمل للمقيمين المحليين بمشاركة متحدثين محليين وأيضا عالميين. أيضا هناك عدة ورش عمل لمدراء البرامج والمشاركين الإداريين في إدارة البرامج المختلفة. حرصنا في دعوة المتحدثين من داخل المملكة، متحدثين متميزين وكذلك متحدثين عالميين من الولايات المتحدة ومن كندا ومن عدة دول.
ملتقى التخصصات نحو مستقبل برؤية متخصصة.
أما الآن مع كلمة الأستاذ الدكتور أيمن عبدو، أمين عام الهيئة السعودية للتخصصات الصحية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. صباح الخير. Good morning everybody. Less than a minute in Arabic and then I'll switch for our dear friends. You've heard this already. يعني سعيد جدا بوجودنا في هذا المكان. أشكر جزيلا يعني المستشفى وإدارته لاستضافتنا. الخطابات طلعت في يوم والجواب جاء ثاني يوم، فيدل على يعني اهتمام المستشفى بالفكرة ويدل على عمق الشراكة والأخوة والتعاون بين الجهتين، فشكرا جزيلا. أشكركم جميعا على الحضور. يعني أنا عارف كلكم مشغولين. أشكركم على تكبد معاناة بعضكم السفر وإغلاق الأعمال والعيادات. هذا يدل أيضا على your commitment for training and for the future. Good morning everybody. I was here about 8 years ago, 7 years ago, and I was here to talk. That was the first quality symposium in King Fahd Hospital, and I came to speak about the 7 habits of highly effective people, and the hospital was small at that time. And I'm always impressed when I come to see how much this place is is evolving, and it's a true example of our country, our passion, our story, if I may say. Congratulations for the continuous progress and success. We're here today to celebrate education and knowledge and training and the future. You all know that we are facing major challenges, and we have major opportunities. Change is happening around us in an incredibly fast and scary pace. Many of you here helped and led this change. We have a new healthcare system, we have a new model of care, we have a new purchasing system, a new finance system. And I think if we don't adapt to that as educators, as trainers, we will be left out, and we will not be able to contribute enough. We have 3 or 4 objectives of this meeting, the most important of which is that we come together under one room and we talk about the future of education. And to emphasize the point that our mission is collaborative. There is no one person in this room that can do this alone. In fact, all of us in this room together cannot do it. We need people in the next door, and we need the nurse and the ward, and we need the patient to collaborate. And we sometimes even need fake patients, like standardized patients. So we're trying to emphasize that we need to do this together. 2, we need to emphasize on accreditation. I think the Commission has not given enough attention for accreditation over the years. And I think we need to focus on that as the pivotal point in improving quality. As you know, the seats, the training seats or the training opportunities in the Commission has doubled in the last 5 years. Literally doubled. Not kind of doubled, literally doubled. 107% increased growth of training spots in the last 4 years. That has strained us all, and that has definitely affected quality of training. So I think we need to stop at this stage and think, are we doing the right thing? Are we in the right track? So that's the second goal. Third goal is to see what can we do as a group to support the transformation in healthcare. We cannot ignore that the way we're going to be practicing medicine 5 years from today is going to be very different than today, and 10 years from today is going to be completely different than the way it is today. If we don't prepare ourselves, and if we don't prepare our trainees, we're going to be in trouble. And so the question I will leave you with is, what do we need to do today to prepare ourselves for that future environment and reality? I would like to thank all the speakers, local and international speakers. We have wonderful gurus, big shots in accreditation and education sitting right here. We'll be very looking forward to learning from them. We have great local speakers, people who have done it, who know how to do it. I would like to thank all the organizers from the Commission and from the hospital. I'm not going to name anybody, but thank you all very much. Finally, I would like to thank the person who had the idea, who planned it, who executed it, who welcomed us all here, Dr. Abdurrahman Hussawi. شكرا جزيلا, جزاك الله ألف خير على كل الجهود اللي سويتها. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this day, and we will be here together for criticism, for ideas, for challenges, and for discussions. Thank you.
شكرا بروفيسور أيمن. أما الآن نبدأ جلسات الملتقى. الجلسة الأولى بعنوان Governance of Graduate Medical Education and International Perspective مع الدكتور عارف العريبي. Chairpersons will be دكتور عبد الرحمن هوساوي and دكتور عبد الرحمن المطيري. تفضل.
I can't hear you.
Of course you hear me. Now it's working. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm glad to be here. I'm home. It's really strange to say glad to be here because I've always been here. So
Good morning, everyone. Inshallah, we're going to have a wonderful morning session and afternoon sessions. I have the honor and pleasure to introduce my dear friend and brother, Dr. Arif Al-Arabi, who I spent about 5 years in London, Ontario, when I was in training, and I got to know this great individual, a true physician, leader, and educator. Arif is an associate professor in anesthesia at the Schulich Medical School at the University of Western Ontario. He is also a well-versed educator who won a number of education awards, and you will know throughout the day why. He's also a member of the College of the Royal College Competency by Design working group for anesthesiology, and we all know that that's the new trend for the medical education, basically, and residency training. So he's an expert in this field. He co-chaired 2 North American conferences, among many others that we will probably don't have the time to talk about, and we would love to spend the rest of the time listening to him and asking him questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Arif for the first lecture.
Can you hear me? شكرا دكتور عبد الرحمن. أنا سعيد جدا أن أكون بين أهلي هنا في السعودية، وخلال الأيام الماضية استمعت واطلعت على مشاريع الهيئة ومجهود الأخوة في الهيئة، والحقيقة عجبت جدا وأتمنى لهم التوفيق، وأتمنى أن الجميع يلتف حول الهيئة في المشاريع المستقبلية. واعتقد ان كيف ما سمعت الدكتور ايمن ان السعوديه الان بالتركيبه الحاليه هي من افضل او افضل المناطق لتاهيل برنامج تدريبي ممتاز جدا يضاهي البرامج العالميه. توكل على الله. So today I will speak about the governance of postgraduate medical education, which is very related to what's going on now in Saudi Arabia. I'll start by this quote. So this is, today my job is to try to feed your thoughts with information. Information is not a knowledge, so you still have some homework to do. Take whatever you hear, as you heard, you can criticize it, you can see if it's applicable to your environment. Each environment is different. So if you talk to the IT people, say when there's a standardized softwares, when you try to play them in different environments, they don't work the same. So just think of it as the same thing. Before I start, I have to make this very clear. Since I'm talking about the international perspective, there are a lot of good training programs in the world, but I will be a little bit biased for many reasons. So you'll hear me saying I like this, or I like specifically the training system in Canada because I am trained in Canada. I'm former program director and director of postgraduate education in Canada. I've also had the pleasure and honor to be part of the CBD process. The goal today is to walk you through the past journey of the development of medical education, what exists right now, and what are the future plans. If you look at the world map, you can I can narrow the good training programs to 4 main training structures in Canada, United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. These are well known. I think most of you know that these are the ones most people go to be trained and specialized and even subspecialized, and people borrow their training structures and materials. If I have to pick one common thing that these four structures share is their robust governance structure. They invest a lot of time, resources, just to keep this process going in the right direction with good feedback mechanism and reviews. And I give this example because I know there are a lot of Canadian trained physicians here in Saudi Arabia. A lot of people were trained around the time of 2002, and we know those people are well trained, they're good physicians, they're subspecialized, and everybody's satisfied with their training. However, the government was, or the governance structure wasn't happy at that time, so they aim high. They reviewed their, the health sector in general, and part of it is the postgrad medical education, and you can see there are some bold statements there. I mean, one of those education programs should be changed, despite the good reputations. The other example, in the United Kingdom, in 2013, Greenaway, Dr. Greenaway came up with this very thorough and comprehensive review of the British training system. It's worth reading. You may reflect on the report and see, you'll see some of the issues are applicable even here, locally in Saudi Arabia. And again, the same thing, despite the good reputations of the British training system, he too came with very bold statements also there. So the training structure should be changed. There should be immediate discussions. They're calling for immediate actions. The report, wherever you go, you can have some sense of anxiety and fear that we're not there yet. We need to do more. And probably in a few years you will see some changes in the British training system. Now, when it comes to the past of the medical training, I can reflect on the past history of the Canadian training system. So it started back in 1824. That was the first training program was in Montreal. And then in 1880, the famous Dr. Osler, who some call him the author of the, he called him the father of the current medical training, because he brought the idea and the concept of the bedside teaching. In 1910, this is another big report worth reading. Most people in medical education know Dr. Flexner report and how it changed how we govern, how we train, and defined the requirements for an ideal training program. And because of his report, 50% of medical schools in North America were closed, including Western, my university. In 1912, the Medical Council of Canada was born. In 1929, the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada was established. In 1932 was the first Royal College exam for surgery. In 1950 was first accreditation survey. So it took more than 20 years for the Royal College to take the first accreditation. So again, if you reflect on the current local challenges, just be patient. You will get there. So you will face a lot of obstacles, but even in good environments and good countries, things can go slow sometimes. In 1975, the Canadian residency became from hospital-based to university-affiliated, which is a big step. You'll hear me talking today about how the university affiliation unique to the Canadian system and how it made it strong. In 1996, the CAN-MIDS, I'm glad to see and hear that the Saudi training structure depends on the CAN-MIDS. I'm a big believer in the CAN-MIDS. It takes more than just a medical expert to make a physician. In 2002, as you heard, the Romano report that led to changes. In 2005, there was a first update, and as anticipation to CBD, there was a need to update the CAN-MIDS in 2015, where the manager changes to leader, and they added quality improvement and patient safety to all CAN-MIDS. And in July 2017, we started CBD in Canada. So that's a huge process, and the CBD is now considered as the biggest change in medical education in 100 years. We only started for anesthesia and ENT. So why should we have good training programs? The answer is simple. Good factories make good products. So if you focus in your factory, your aim is to produce the competent physician who will contribute to the patient care, which is the other main target. Thank you. Now, if we try to define who are the stakeholders, who are the different groups, parties that controls and governs the postgraduate medical education, I'm going to start with a simple model which most of us understand, that to teach in the teaching in school anywhere you need a trainer and trainees. There's two of them exchanging. I wouldn't say one is receiving and the other not, exchanging knowledge, and that's where the teaching happens. But it has to happen within an environment. It seems simple. However, the needs for these two to achieve their jobs and goals is huge. There is huge requirements there. It can be simple things like just a few committees, or you need a library, you need curriculum, you need somebody to look after curriculum, you need postgraduate medical education committees, you need the faculty to be monitored, evaluations, and so on. There's a lot of requirements. And since it becomes complex, you need strong administrative structures that keeps these things together. In the top of those is the government and the regulatory authority. You need people to have license. You need a body like the Royal College to oversee the entire country, which is equivalent to the Saudi Commission. And you need affiliated universities to give it the academic frame. I'm going to give you a simpler model and define and limit the number of those stakeholders. So we agreed in the government, and then we have the regulatory bodies, we have the academic hospitals, we have the certifying bodies, we have the professional house staff organizations, and the university. Those are the main stakeholders. However, the university is very central, especially in Canada, and it does have three other stakeholders: the faculty, the residence program committee, and the residents themselves. Everything should go down to the residents at the end. So everybody is working to achieve and graduate a competent resident there. But the residents themselves are considered as stakeholders. Now let's start with the government. This is probably the easiest. One of them is the source of the money. So that's how they support the universities and training programs, and also the hospitals where the training actually happens. And then they have to ensure that the appropriate training is taking place in an organized manner. And they control the numbers, so how many positions for each specialty according to the need, for patients' need, which the country needs. So you can't just have 100 anesthesia positions and one internal medicine. This is just an extreme example. So somebody has to have a global look and see the distribution, how it should look like. And it does represent the public, so it is the government. The second stakeholder is the professional house staff organization, and this is another unique feature in the Canadian training system. And these are organizations that represent the residents, the trainees. And what's unique about them in Canada, they're independent. They don't belong to anybody else. And they're very strong, and it gives the residents the feel of support. And one of I gave this example 2 days ago during my talk. So I will tell you a story about the 2007 international sponsored residence, which also applies to the Saudi residents. In 2007, Maybe some of you were there. So there was a big problem there. So what happened is the Canadian trainees, they started to having call stipends. So if you're a home call or an in-house call, you receive a stipend, and wasn't there before 2007. So some of the international sponsored residents, they wanted the same, because it's their right, yes, in one way, because they started to do calls the same as the other Canadian ones. And then the payer said, okay, let's sit and review the contracts. And when they reviewed the contracts, they found out that the international sponsored residents, they're not paid the same amount of salaries like the Canadian ones. It's very complex, but this is what happened, and resulted in, now we're not talking about the stipend. We need fair payment. We need your governments to have fair payment. So at the end, they issued a binding arbitration to stop all international sponsored residents by January 2008. I'm giving you this example just to show how protected are the residents and how strong are these organizations. And there's one other big group that protected the residents, but the strongest are the provincials one, not the government one. Now the academic hospitals, this is where the training happened, and they are responsible to provide good working conditions. They have to provide space for teaching. They work with the universities and the departments to provide the needs for training. And they provide other services and benefits to the residents, including occupational health and salary and benefits. Now talk about the certifying bodies. So this is the Royal College. It's the most commonly known. We all know about the Royal College Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. It's ruled nationally and internationally. So it's the one probably we as program directors or universities, we communicate the most because of they are the designers for the curriculum, and at the end everybody has to visit them to do the exams in terms of the trainees. So they do set the standards of training. And they are responsible in evaluating and certifying the competence of postgraduate trainees. I underlined the end. This is the tradition. This is what we all knew for years and years, that you do the training and at the end you visit the Royal College, you do your exams, and now you're a specialist. You're a FRCBC. Okay, and this is I wanted to open your eyes on something coming, that the exam is not a certification exam anymore. According to the CBD, you will do the exam about a year, 9 months to 1 year before the end of training. You go back to the training program and you have to prove that you are competent. It's just one check box toward competency. Again, they are responsible in updating the current structure and also designing new ones, such as CBD. The second stakeholder is the Medical Council of Canada, which is a licensing exam. So if you want to have an independent license, even after passing the Royal College exam, you have to have the LMCC 1 and LMCC 2. And for IMGs, you have to have more, they have to evaluate you with the evaluating exam and the NAC OSCE in Ontario. The regulatory bodies, these are basically the college. Like the CPSO in Ontario, it gives you a practice license, and they focus on the ethical principles. And I copied and pasted this from their website just to give you an idea about their mission and what they are looking for. So it's the same body that regulates the faculty, and each one of us in Canada will undergo evaluation with the 360 multi-source feedback by the college. They send you someone to check your charts. They make you evaluate yourself. They ask your colleagues also. So it's a very thorough process, and they want to make sure that you're fit and you're fit to practice and provide service to the public. CMPA, it's a mandatory requirement that you have to have a medical insurance for a start. Now, the biggest stakeholder is the university, and I'm going to spend some time talking about the universities, where it is the center, and everything probably will pool, even those other pool to the university, even those other stakeholders, the government, the hospital, the Royal College, everybody work with the university. And again, it's unique to the Canadian training system. I have a slide near the end to show you the differences between the different 4 big countries, and you will see this is one of the biggest differences. Again, same thing, they provide the infrastructure, they oversee all of the postgrad training committees, and they do look after the residents, they do internal reviews, they look after the faculty also, which will be very supportive to the residency program committee, and they look after the continuous professional development and promotions. The BGMA office, which is in the university. Again, you see their rules. They oversee all of the training program committees, which in Canada there are about 54 of them, and they make sure that they can pass the accreditation and they have the right structure to train. Now, the other stakeholder, which is the target of all of this, are the residents. So the residents, they play multiple roles. So they are trainees, yes, but at the same time, they're also employees. And they're professional, carrying a license, and they're also teachers. We involve them in teaching medical students, and sometimes they visit other health care trainees. The faculty, it's not very well represented in Canada, but they're doing a major. They have a major contribution in the teaching and the governance structure. They are teachers, they're mentors, they're supervisors. It's not a paid position in Canada, and they may or may not have formal representation. So I can say they're the weakest of the stakeholders. The residency program committee, this is where the detailed work is done. These are where the direct contact between the leaders and the trainees. This is an example of my own residency program committee, and you can see I have representations from the main stakeholders within my training program. I try to represent everybody, and this is mainly based on the accreditation requirements, because they want me to have a representation from each side and each group that's involved in the teaching. But when we started doing the CBD, we thought we need more than just a residency program committee, and also we will have 2 cohorts, which now we have it now. We have 2 training instructions running parallel to each other at the same time, the CBD and the traditional cohort. So we created a few subcommittees to help us, and we found them very helpful. And then the Royal College wanted us to do start a competence committee, which is a new concept in medical training, and it's we're not required to chair it as program directors, so you have to have another person who chairs the committee. And we still have a CBD working group, because it's a new system. We have no idea how things will shape up, and we wanted to make sure that we follow up with the QI subcommittee and make changes as we go. Now, we'll talk about the international perspectives. The reference of this slide is at the bottom there. There's a lot of good things you can read about the governance also in the reference. So I'm going to compare the main 4 training programs, the Canada, USA, UK, and Australia. I'll start by university. As I said, it's very high, the involvement of university, again, very unique. In USA, it's variable, because there are some community or hospitals that are accredited, and they don't belong to the university. It's still, again, I have to remind everybody, these 4 structures, they do produce good products. They do produce good trainees, and we see them. But it just the way they do things. And I wanted to know you to know what exists. And again, as it's like on my first slide, I give you the information and you analyze it. In UK, the same thing. The GMC and the Royal College of Specialties, they have a Royal College for each specialty. They do look after the training. They have regional deans and they have lead deans, and it's the same thing in Australia. It's minimal involvement when it comes to university. So I was asked to be close to the mic. The source of curriculum is the Royal College in Canada. They design the curriculums for different specialties and they deliver them to residency program committee. And in the States, USA, the ACGME does the same thing. The GMC and the Royal College, and Australia, it's similar to the British system. And it makes sense that whoever designs the curriculum should look after the accreditation, basically, because your curriculum, you extract evaluations and everything will run according to the curriculum. So that's why you see they're the same bodies when it comes to the accreditation. The trainee and evaluation certification, they're usually, most of them are the same. There's the specialty exam run by a different group than the licensing exams. So you can see the differences there. Now the residence representation, and we talked about this, is that Canada is unique because the body that represents the residents are independent. They have a stronger voice than the other three countries there. Some of those countries, it's not mandatory, and some of the residents are not unionized. So I have few slides. In a few minutes, we'll try to predict the future of governance and how the new changes will change the governance of the medical education. And so this is what we talked about today. Again, the goal is to produce good physicians to serve the public. That's the ultimate goal. So this has to go right, otherwise we're not achieving our goals. And again, I show you this slide about the need to change the medical education in order to meet the public needs. Same thing in UK. I showed you this slide that there should be changes. And then some of you might be familiar with this report, that the third most common cause of deaths in the States are medical errors. And the authors also said we only see the medical errors that were recorded. This number can be even higher. So despite the good training system, we still see big mistakes. 2010, the GMC in UK, they surveyed the fresh graduates, and 1 in 10 felt non-confident to be a consultant or work independent. So that's a scary number. 10% is a big number. And again, knowing that 90% of the disciplinary claims against physicians are due professionalism related issues. And I have to say, our current training system is a little bit difficult in terms of allowing you to assess professionalism objectively. So one of the big changes in the new training structure is to how to do this a little bit more objectively. And everybody in medical education knows this. An ongoing problem is failure to fail. Although we identify a weak residents, but we still sometimes we can't have the enough, I repeat, the objective criteria to take serious actions. So we needed more objective system to help us. Now the current system, most training programs that they give you rotations and you have just to survive those rotations and pass the rotations, and then at the end you go sit the Royal College exam and you're a consultant. And this may not give you a good idea about the level of competency. And it makes more sense nowadays with someone at the level of the residents who to lead their training, given the fact that they're adult learners, so they should participate more actively in their training. And then if you know the history of the British training system, they moved to competency-based medical education way back, and they came up with multiple and a huge number of competencies, and over the years they found that it's impossible to make people go through all competencies. And this is I took this from Greenaway report, so it's a very interesting report to read. And at the end, everybody says we need another functional unit in the medical education, which were now defined as the EPA, which is the entrustable professional activity. That's the one should be the target when you train people. And now this is another concept in medical education, that it should be a continuous process from undergrad to residency to independent practice till retirement. These main groups should be connected. This is what's happening now in Canada. I want to give you an idea about this change, and if you try to recall what we talked about during the lecture, you will see that every stakeholder should be involved, and in Canada was involved in order to achieve this. So people who graduate from the medical school, they go into the first stage, which is called transition to discipline. We deleted the PGY year, so there's no PGY 1, PGY 2, PGY 3, PGY 4. They're gone. There are stages. The first stage is about 2 months. The second stage is the foundation, which is about 18 months. And then the core, which is about 24, I think, to 28 months. And then they sit the Royal College exam. You can see it there. They come back and they go to the next stage, which is transition to independent practice. It's
2 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'm done. The transition to practice, and then they go to practice on their own. They still kept under the umbrella of the Royal College as a continuous process. Summary, just quickly summarize how the communications happen between the different stakeholders. This is our target, the resident. The resident program committee has the direct contact. The PGME committee of the university, and then also the university looks after the faculty who's also in direct contact with the resident. The Royal College contacts with these main 4 stakeholders. The professional house staff organization looks after the residents, and then the licensing body, they do communicate with university, faculty, and residents. And the hospitals, they communicate with the residents, and then the government looks after everybody. This is my last slide. You will have, when you try to make a change, you're exhausting your resources, you're using a lot of energy. Don't waste the energy on fighting the old. Just keep going, focus on building the new, and keep going. And أتمنى التوفيق لكم في هذا المشروع الكبير، والتفوا حول الهيئة وساعدوهم، وبارك الله فيكم.
Thank you, Arif, for this enlightening speech about the importance of governance. Something we don't feel, we don't see, but it's key to making successful education systems, especially in the field of medical education. We'll open the floor for questions, probably a couple, so that we can stay on time.
Any questions?
If there are any questions, if you please raise your hand.
Well, Dr. Arif, I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
What about the Japanese medical education system, the Singapore, South Korea? Have we experienced any quality in that part of the world? We always kind of occupied with the Western type of educational system.
I have no idea. Yeah, I would say from what I read, the four I showed you are the most commonly exported, I would say, to the rest of the world. And as I say, it doesn't mean that the other programs are bad or anything. I don't know if that's something to do with the language. It's how in Japanese it's written. The curriculums and trainings are designed for a specific culture, because the English language is the the most commonly spoken. Something the French, they have a good program, and you'll be surprised that the Dutch they're very advanced in medical education, but their training is not everywhere. So I have a feeling that it could be something related to the culture, the language, maybe. But there are a lot of countries they're advanced in some aspects of the medical education.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Arif.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali, very nice presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Aribi, for the very nice presentation. My question is that when you compare the competency-based training in Canada model with the classic one that we had before, what would be the barriers and the challenges following this new training model?
There are a lot of challenges. It's a completely new system, and we never been tried before. So we didn't know how it will shape up at the end. We didn't know the product well, and we didn't know what's ahead of us, because nobody went in that way before us. So we had to navigate and find out what are the obstacles and fix them as we go. But things we found, for example, the faculties are not paid in Canada, and they're already working hard with the traditional cohort when it comes to evaluations and teaching, and now all of a sudden we're asking them to do more in addition to the traditional cohort, because there are two paths there. So that's one of the biggest challenges we have with the CBD and the existing cohort. So they have to do more. Having the two together, one is per calendar year, the other is per stage. So it's very hard to schedule rotations. The third, rotation is not the target with CBD. Rotation is the target with the traditional cohort. So we use time as a resource to achieve EPAs, entrustable professional activities. And this is new. We're still exercising it. So it creates some challenges. How much time you need to do 3 EPAs, how much time you do 1, how much time you need to do 1 complex EPA, and so on. But I have to say the start is better than what we anticipated. We feel a little bit more relieved after 8 months. There's one more question I see there.
Thank you, Dr. Arif, for this nice presentation. Actually, we face, as other program directors, challenges, and we are facing difficulties to get commitment from stakeholders. So we have support from the Saudi Council, but we really face difficulties from stakeholders as they focus on the service rather than the training. So from your experience in Canada or other countries, how we can overcome this problem?
I wish I can answer the question in 1 or 2 minutes. I think that's why we're all here. I think that's why the Saudi Commission is doing all of this work, is to bring all stakeholders together and discuss how they better communicate. It comes down to communication or commitment, as you said, and find out what are the gaps and how you make the system more solid, connected, and again, I give you the idea what's there, and you apply to your environment, and then you choose what's applicable, or be creative. You can come up with something new to solve your problems. If it's a faculty, you need to study the background and study the landscape and see why they are not engaged. So it will take time. But as I said in my first few slides, during the history, this is not unique to Saudi Arabia. It's everywhere. Change takes time. Just be patient and work on your plans, and try to solve your mistakes. So and again, that's why we're here. I believe that's the main reason there.
Thank you, Dr. Arif. A small question,
Thank you.
Please. A small question, please.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Dr. Arif?
Yes.
Yeah, just a small question, please. In your experience and from your readings, and thank you for your excellent presentation, but changing from objective and evaluation-based learning to a competency-based learning, in our practice here, how much do you think we need in years or months' time to transition completely the medical programs from objectives to a competency-based learning?
Probably you mean from subjectivity to objectivity.
Yeah.
That's okay. So because that's the issue with the current training. However, we all dream that we can get rid of the subjectivity with the competency-based education, but I don't believe you can. That subjectivity is still there. And we still see when the competence committee meets and we receive tons now of evaluations, see some subjective comments that are helpful. But in terms of, back to your question, how much time you need, I can't define specific time, but I just repeat what I said. It will be slow. It will take time. Be patient. And there are people now before you doing this work, which will make it a little bit easier. So this, and there's a lot of other competency-based medical education projects in the world. The Americans they've done also good work when it comes to competency-based medical education. They use the same principles of EPAs and milestones, and the British are a little bit different, but something similar. And so you can share and borrow, and this is the beauty in my experience with the people who work in medical education, that they share resources and they care about medical education anywhere in the world. So if you share resources, it may shorten your time, if this answers the question. Yeah.
One last question here, and we'll move to the next session.
Thank you, Dr. Arifi, for this informative presentation. It's just regarding the claims that you mentioned. It's around 90% of the errors from professionalism, but this doesn't mean all of them are technical errors. No. It can be the service, it can be the relation between the staff and the patients. It's not 90% technical error.
No, but
yeah.
Those are the lawsuits, so the medical legal side. Okay, the other study showed the drug error was specific to the drug error. So professionalism is a very big subject there, right? So it ranges. There's some technical side related to professionalism. It's incorporated in the medical experts. So even when we evaluate a procedure, for example, in a session of central line, there is a professionalism part with multiple dots under it. So, it is a big issue. I'm not sure if the new system will solve the entire issue. Maybe in next 50 years there will be another training structure with another name. We don't know.
Okay, but I think the perspective from that is that the education should involve some how we say that professionalism in how the relation between the professional and the public, which I don't think they take it actually in the actual education in depth. It's just the technical part that we work on it.
I agree,
100%.
And in the CanMeds and the Saudi Arabia, they use CanMeds. So what you're saying, the technical is the medical expert, we call it with CanMeds, and then the other ones are called intrinsic CanMed rules. There's other 6. One of them is professionalism. They're there. They set up all the requirements. It's just implementing them, and I wouldn't say maybe I use force people to use them. Again, that's why we're here. They want to make the change, make sure people are using it.
All right, I think we'll conclude the first session. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Dr. Arif, for this great presentation and your questions. And before we move on to the next, I just want to make a quick announcement that we can make this session more interactive by downloading the Forums app, looking at more information about the program. You might be surprised that there are no programs printed because we wanted to go high tech. So you will find the app. It has all the information you need, and I'm sure the younger generation, they probably are already in, and they have comments about how we can make it better. So I'm just telling the rest of the group to please look for it. It's SCFSH Accreditation Forum. If you look for it, and this will help us get questions, and also we'll get your feedback about the organization. We'll now would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Abdurrahman al-Mtayri. He's the Academic Affairs Director in the Saudi Commission, Dubai Saudi Commission Hospital, who will be introducing our next presenter. And I'll give up the mic to...
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. This next session will be around the area of challenging within our current accreditation processes and the roadmap Saudi, how to improve this system right now. We'll have Dr. Hussein al-Hussein, who is our colleagues, fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of Canada. Dr. Hussein did his residency program in radiation oncology. I knew Dr. Hussein personally when he was the Director of Postgraduate and Scholarship Administration at King Fahd Medical City, when he managed hundreds of number of residents, either at King Fahd Medical City campus or those who were studying mainly in the state in Canada. Dr. Hussein and I worked 3 years ago to enhance our residency program educational quality. We improve it, we create a mechanism, and I believe Dr. Hussein right now is working with the Saudi Council as a consultant for accreditation. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Hussein al-Hussein.
Thank you so much. Bismillah wa salam ala Rasulullah. It's indeed quite a privilege to be among this elite group of representatives of the academic and training affairs, postgraduate medical education in Saudi Arabia. This elite group is going to enrich the whole day today, and we are looking forward to a very interactive 45 minutes that's coming ahead of us. And before I go further, I'm just gonna be introducing some statistics about the participants of this forum. So we do have almost 969 participants who have registered as of this past Thursday, and the majority of them, 30% of them are program directors, 17% of them are program coordinators, that's site directors, and almost 23% are the Saudi Commission surveyors for our training programs, those who go to do the accreditation surveys, and the other percentage is distributed among the academic affairs and program administrators and academic affairs administrators and multiple other stakeholders in postgraduate medical education in Saudi Arabia. So this is really indeed is having everyone on this platform, and I would like to have this presentation as short as possible and hear more from you about the challenges that you might have seen that Saudi Commission is having and is not being put forward here. So we are going to be learning from each other, and the next part of this presentation is going to be an overview of the roadmap of the Saudi Commission. Where is it going from today till tomorrow, inshallah? So please feel free to have your thoughts geared up so that I would like to make this presentation as short as possible. So heading off, just kind of defining briefly what is the Saudi Commission accreditation. So the Saudi Commission in general accredits training centers and programs utilizing all the potentials in order to serve training purposes. And it does through via ensuring the effective participation of qualified consultants and specialists in the training process, and via creating an appropriate learning environment for trainees based on postgraduate medical education best practices and evidence. And reaching to our common goal for all of us who are here today is in order to provide the trainees with the highest quality training that qualify them to practice safely in their respective specialties, serving us as patients, our families, and our beloved ones. And that's eventually the main passion that all of us are here today for, in order to reach to that. I'm not sure if the voices is still okay. I think there is a difference in the tone. So we're going to be looking forward to what are the challenges when it comes to the accreditation process, and from there we're going to go through where are we going with these challenges and how are we going to be utilizing these challenges to enlighten us while we are moving ahead from today. So the process, we know that the accreditation process in the Saudi Commission for Health Specialty is lengthy, and we know that it is not seamless. And we know that it is quite kind of complex and might be variable from one program to another. So the process is not yet the perfect process. We are in need to address that, and we're going to come up shortly on the next slide. Where are we supposed to go? Tools. Are we using the technology, and are we using the best available tools in the right context? Are we maximizing the utility of all the available tools that are available in the postgraduate medical education that's been utilized by our colleagues in the international counterparts? The accreditation standards. There is kind of a question about what are the accreditation standards that we are using, and are these accreditation standards compatible with what is used internationally, i.e. when you're talking about the Canadian Royal College, ACGME International, UK or Australians, and how are we standing compared to that, and what are we doing to improve it if we are having any gap or any area for improvement, or how can we bridge that gap? The surveyors, 23% of the participants of this forum are surveyors. So how are we supporting these surveyors? Are we protecting them with a good amount of time to be able to participate in this process? Are we supporting them to the fullest of our capacity, acknowledging the work they do? And are we training them to be a better ones? How are we doing about that? That's seriously one area that indeed there is an opportunity for improvement. The accreditation manpower. We do have an accreditation administrative staff under the Saudi Commission. And what are we doing when it comes to training them and bringing them up to the level of being in charge of this important process of training? If we accredit programs that are not functioning to the level of expectation, we're going to be having an outcome that's going to be much below our expectation. That's a very easy thing to imagine. So what are we doing in regards to whether it is a quantity or quality of our administrative manpower and who are in charge of accreditation? The volume, as Dr. Arif have mentioned, the Canadian Royal College is our international benchmark that we're looking for, in addition to ACGME and others. On the map that Dr. Arif have shown, there are leaders in that field of postgraduate medical education. What are the differences between us and them? And one simple thing that we can easily point out too, Saudi Commission is not about physicians and surgeons only. It is in charge of nursing, dentists, pharmacists, all other allied health professionals. And this is unique by itself. Even in in Canada, Canadian Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons is not in charge of family physicians. There is a dedicated college for the family physicians. So with that comes volume, and with that comes challenges, and with that comes opportunity for how can we address that and continue to be unique, not only being unique, but leading that uniqueness, which is actually an opportunity that is seriously having the Saudi Commission for Health Specialty, when it excels doing so. It's not going to be only in that map that Dr. Arif is going to show, or he might be showing in a few years of time, but it's going to be also a unique place in that map, because it is an institution that is in charge of multiple other disciplines, and if we are doing this to the best of their quality, that's indeed not something that can be kind of be a story that can be repeated by others, and might be that the Saudi Commission is going to be the one that's heading off on that. So with that volume is not easy. We are aware and conscious of the lack of indicators for performance measurement. We don't have a dashboard that we are able to see how are we performing when it comes to accreditation, how are we performing when it comes to the outcome of this accreditation, how are we performing when it comes to the time that we are taking to in order to accredit a program. It's not uncommon, and Prof. Ayman Abdi can further elaborate on that, how many phone calls he receives, or Dr. Abdurrahman Hausawi, for programs that have been submitted a year or 2 or 3 years ago and nothing has been heard about them. And it's something that, what are we going to be doing about that? And that's something that is not an easy if you don't have a dashboard that tells you what are you doing today and what have you been doing yesterday and what are you going to be seeing tomorrow when you check up your dashboard. So that is one huge challenge, and that's not an easy one to establish, but it is very doable. In the follow-up, what are we doing to follow up the accreditation status of our training programs, and what are we doing when it comes to issues that had been brought up during the accreditation visits, and what is being done before we come back, whether it is a year later or 4 years later. The communication, we are aware of the communication process that is currently in place is utilizing manpower rather than being an automated communication, and we are aware of these gaps that this communication is resulting at when it comes to making things done. The maintenance of accreditation status is huge area of a question, and huge area of where are we going with this. When we accredit a training program, what are we having in that training program 4 years later, and what's happening in between? We know that, and that's very well known, it's not unique to the Saudi Commission accreditation, but it's also been replicated in the GCIA, Sibahi accreditation, and all other accreditations that people gear up, bring up the best of their capability during the day of the accreditation visit. And when that accreditation visit, things are variable. There are places where they take things seriously as it was during the accreditation visit and continue as they have been doing even prior to the accreditation visits, and those people who have looked at the accreditation as a goal and that's it, and they go down to where they have been and come up next accreditation in 4 years. In between, you are losing lots of opportunity of reaching to your goal that we have shared, that coming up with a competent outcome. These outcomes are the trainees who are going to deliver the safe medical care. And that's the basic goal of the Saudi Commission. So we are going to be losing lots of opportunity in the 4 years. So what are we doing to maintain that? And when we come back for the re-accreditation, what are we doing when these accreditation status are to be provoked or revoked from these training centers that are not doing well? What are we going to be doing with these trainees? That neither the Saudi Commission nor the training centers, nobody want to revoke any accreditation, but that is a challenge. So how can we work together to make that far away from happening? What are we doing when it comes to complaint and appeal? Do we have an effective system? And does that system is seamless? Does it is it actually trustworthy? Is it something that I am able and confident to know that if I file a complaint or an appeal, I'm going to be able to rest comfortably knowing that somebody is going to be taking seriously that and having to call me or to contact me or to act upon it before I have to follow up on it myself, or before someone has to speak to the highest hierarchy in the Saudi Commission in order to address that. So that is a challenge. And constructing an effective complaint and appeal system, and actually policies and procedures to be in place to have that addressed not only on paper but on reality is a challenge, and that's something that Saudi Commission has to address and to work on. So what I'm going to be presenting here in this slide is what the Saudi Commission is actually either in the process of going to, or is putting up or trying to put up the efforts together to achieve that. And without your help, without your support, and without your engagement, nothing of that can be done. So, revising the process. We know that the process is complex, lengthy, and I am confident, being just having an opportunity looking at some of that process, that there is lots of waste in that process. And there is lots of steps that can be modified, whether eliminated or briefed or actually taken altogether, because it's not looking to be changing the eventual outcome. So that process has to be revised, and it is under the process of being revision. And the comments, the complaints, the suggestions, the recommendations that every single surveyor, program director, academic affairs representative, resident is providing is always helping into that, because without that, that process is going to still continue to be on the same process, having lots of waste. Automating the process. It's not uncommon to have phone calls from staff of the Saudi Commission following up on things, trying to initiate things, accreditation status that have been already expired, and somebody, if nobody will act upon it and follow up on it, it might pass 6 months or 12 months later that's been addressed. So, depending in this era of high technology, depending on individuals and human to be interfering in the process to make reminders and alert is not the right way, and there is a huge amount of resources that can really reduce the manpower that's required to do the job and make it more effective and make it more kind of reliable and in a very credible way, rather than having to miss or leave others if you are going to be doing it by individual human being. So automating the process, and there is a huge amount of effort being put through the information integration system that the Saudi Commission is looking forward to implement in the Saudi Commission. Optimizing this accreditation standards. After this slide, I'm going to present a very small actually table that's going to summarize one of the projects that is just being completed in December. Actually, the first part of the project was completed in December, and the second part, which is the largest part of it, is going to be further continued as long as the Saudi Commission exists, because that's should not be should not be ending at any time, because accreditation standards change, has to be optimized with what happens in the field. So I'm going to come back to that point shortly. Enhancing the surveyor's skills. There had been workshops being done to improve upon the surveyors, and it's being done on not a systematic manner, and we are looking forward to have it done in a very systematic manner and clearly what does it need to be in place prior to conducting the first accreditation visit, rather than recruiting people who are able to do it, and that's about it, with some minimal information. There had been a workshop that lasts from 11 till 5:30 p.m. That's been built into this first accreditation forum, and it's going to be continuing with the annual forums. And that full track is only for surveyors. The second part of training and enhancing the surveyor's skills is to have a second one full day workshop that's to be done on the second time each year. That happens on the second half of the year, so that we can capture those who have joined from one year to the next, so that we don't leave 12 months without training, or actually having like almost like a mini forum for the surveyors to have them up to the speed of what's going on. And there is an e-learning module that we are trying to build together for 2 hours, having scenarios constructed and having certain amount of information in place, and to have it done prior to starting your first visit. The accreditation manpower, there has been plans to equip the accreditation administration staff with training dedicated for accreditation, done with collaboration with international partners, in order to bring up our accreditation staff to the level of this huge task, which they are functioning very well, but it does need much more than that, and to have that kind of continued on the continuous learning from year to year. Performance measurement, where every single step of the accreditation, and actually what happens in the Saudi Commission in general, should be clearly measured and clearly displayed in a dashboard, that I'm able to know where I'm doing today, and rather than having to make phone calls, send emails and inquiries or text messages or so on and so forth to get a part of information that would have to get people out of their way in order to give you that information, rather than having it clearly displayed, and that's part of your job, is just to open the screen and look at where you are doing, rather than calling people to try to get that information from. Reward system. We need actually a huge reward system in order to make it such an, not only an appealing, but a rewarding for every single surveyor to be able to do their job. We are developing a ranking system starting from bronze to silver to gold for the surveyors, and recruiting surveyors with some benefits that will help to ensure that this kind of group of experts are provided with what it takes to seriously acknowledge the work that they do, and to ensure that they are having what it takes to take them off their pathway, clinical pathway, to participate in this very enriching part of their professional performance. To have an effective accreditation maintenance system which follows up upon the accreditation and ensure that you address any issues during the 4 years gap, so that when you come back 4 years later, you don't have to have huge issues that might lead to a change, either a change of the accreditation status, or having, unfortunately, to close a program, which is none of the people in the Saudi Commission want to do that, and unfortunately it results in huge disasters for the trainees, for the hospital, and for the country, of course. So we can prevent that by having a very seamless process of follow-up and red flags and alert system during the 4 years gap, where you can work upon issues as it occurs, rather than wait for it to become a disaster. Having an effective communication tools where you are able to communicate with the least intervention of human being, and having to take time off the administrative staff or your time in order to get a certain information or messages being transferred back and forth. So including the evaluation, the survey evaluation that has to be electronically submitted then, rather than doing it manually and submitting it, and so on and so forth, and follow up on any deficiencies and reminders and so on and so forth, back and forth between the surveyors, the Saudi Commission, and the training centers, and any necessary communication that needs to be delivered. Having the autonomy of the training centers, and that cannot be done without an effective accreditation status starting with, and an effective amount of information that you have in place, policies and processes that are made simple for people to act upon, where the training centers are working in an autonomy and are able to access the Saudi Commission whenever they are in need for, so the Saudi Commission can be there as a support rather than being there to deliver, which takes a huge amount of responsibility on both sides, and give it kind of the highest amount of effectiveness when it comes to delivering things, rather than having to go through the bureaucratic ways back and forth for simple things that you have been doing it over and over and over, and you have been doing it for years. So why do you have to have approval of A versus B person or X person? Having clear red flags that can be initiated by residents, by program directors, by accreditation surveyors, by academic affairs staff, and by the Saudi Commission staff themselves. So having clear red flags with a clear follow-up mechanism that takes upon what is that flag is about, and how serious is that, and how can we do about it prior to becoming an issue. And that leads to having an effective complaint appeal management system with a clear follow-up, that you do not have to do the one thing, the complaint or the appeal once and twice and 3 times, waiting for a response, waiting for an action, and nothing happens, and going to the hierarchy, and all the time you are wasting your precious time and many others' time for something that could be done, actually should be done to make sure that we are delivering high quality training, rather than that you have to follow up on and waste much of your time doing it. With that, I'm going to almost my last slide actually here. The accreditation standards score report summary. I'm just summarizing a work of almost 6 months or over 6 months work that have involved many people into this, and I'm going to summarize that. I'm not going to go into further details of the preparation that led to that. So the Saudi Commission looked at what are we doing when it comes to the accreditation standards that we are using when our surveyors go to review a training program in King Fahd Specialist Hospital in Dammam, for example, general surgery. How's our accreditation standards are looking like, that are in hand of our surveyors, when we compare it to the accreditation standards that are used by the Canadian Royal College when they go to review a residency training program, general surgery residency training program in the University of London, Ontario. So we have conducted an intensive amount of work over a period of over 6 months with people that have been making a huge amount of tasks. They are trainers or surveyors or members of the academic committee, the scientific committees and councils, or just practicing consultants that had been made in 4 groups with a team leader that had been assigned for each one of these groups, and they have been giving a set of training programs for each group, and they have been asked, prior to that, we have been asked to construct a score sheet. What is the score sheet that we are going to use? Because again, we're going back to that we are not looking for physicians and surgeons training. We are looking for dentists, pharmacists, nurses, and others. So that score sheet, when we'd like to use one number, which is that number in the total score, would like to be applicable for all the specialties. Those things that are not applicable are just not to be not applicable, and there is an adjusted total score for each one of the 6 scores that are displayed here. So the teams have worked on reviewing programs that there is one condition there, that that program should not belong to or should not be affiliated with any one of the reviewers. So each one of the 4 teams, none of them had one person have the same specialty of any one of the programs in that group. So we are looking at them as our external eyes, so we don't want any bias or conflict of interest when people are reviewing and scoring these programs. So when it comes to the total average score, how is our accreditation standard is looking like compared to the Canadian, to the international benchmark? Because some of it were American for the dental and pharmacy, and some of it were UK for nursing school, for nursing training program. So how much we are doing compared to the international counterparts for our individual training programs? We are matching the international counterparts by 88%. That's the total average score. But we have been able to identify gaps where our accreditation standards sheet that are only 44% in some programs that are matching the international counterpart when it looks at the specific program-specific resources, i.e. rotations or simulation courses or whatever requirements for accrediting a specific training program. And on the right-hand side, you see the highest score of each one of these 6 cores. It was 100%. We have programs that are over 95%, matching the international counterparts, and not few of them, a good number of them. Some of them are actually being commented clearly by the reviews that their accreditation standards in that specific program are exceeding the international counterpart. And we did have examples of that, and that we are very proud of the group of people who have worked in the scientific committees and council who have worked to make that happen, in addition to our accreditation administration staff. So, in average, the lowest was 68% when it comes to all the 6 cores. When it comes to matching the international counterpart, the highest was 100%, an average total of 88%. And if you allow me, please, to acknowledge and thank our colleagues who have made this project happen, and some of them might be in this audience, others will be in the forum when we go to Jeddah on Thursday, and some we have already met in Riyadh. Dr. Mahal Ammali, Dr. Zulfa Rais, Dr. Usama Al Abdelhadi, and Dr. Mohammed Hamoud, and the team members for each one of these teams. And I'm just going to have this slide available during the discussion, the challenges and the roadmap for you to utilize, improve, and add or delete if one of these things you think is not going to be something that we should keep an eye on. And we are more than happy to hear from you, and seriously, it is indeed a privilege to hear from you and work together to get this to the next level. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hussein. We have about 10 minutes right now for questions. Dr. Hussein, thank you so much for sharing with us all the challenge we are facing in our system. Hopefully, we can overcome all of it. Thank you so much for sharing the roadmap that you guys designed for us. We are confident that you tackle it and it will be achieved soon. Please share with us your name, where you're coming from, which hospital or center you're coming from, and feel free to ask any questions. We have 10 minutes for questions now.
السلام عليكم. هنادي الثقة، أخصائية اعتماد في مستشفى الملك فهد. نواجه كثير مشاكل في الاعتماد لما نقدم عليه، سواء من السيستم يكون هانجينج موست اوف ذا تايم، واحيانا ما يقبل اللي هي رقم الوثيقة او البريد الالكتروني او الجوال المتحدث. في كثير تأخير برضو ديليد في الاكريتيشن، احيانا زاد عدد الحضور برضو نفس الشيء، يعني يعدي عليها 3 أسابيع وما يزيد عدد الحضور، نبغى زيادة مثلا من الهيئة، يتأخر لين يوافقوا الهيئة. في اوقات كثيره برضو خاصه هذه ال4 شهور الاخيره يتاخر الاكريتيشن، يعني احيانا يقام النشاط والاكريتيشن لسه ما خلص. هذه مشكله كبيره نواجهها يعني.
احنا حاليا نتحدث عن medical programs accreditation, but we can mention.
I work with Hanadi and I work on the other side, so I owe it to her to respond to her question. Hanadi is asking about the CME accreditation process, and I used to be the Academic Affairs Administration, where we used to be on the receiving end of Saudi Commission's accreditation, and now I'm sitting on the other side, so I'm not sure what to tell her, but what I can tell her for sure is that Dr. Manal al-Nasser, who's a nurse, PhD, expert in the field, who's working very hard. She just joined us. She already showed a huge basically leadership, and we're seeing change in that very narrow time period. I think it's just a matter of time before we start seeing the outputs of what she's working on, and you can basically take me on that, Hanadi. You can call me and remind me because I trust Dr. Manal, and I'm sure that she will deliver. It's just a matter of month. There's also an enabling component in the Saudi Commission that is now currently being developed. One of the key cornerstones of the strategy for development of the Saudi Commission is to become a leading organization in the, basically a digitally transformed organization. That is very much needed to address those problems, so that no more hanging of the system, no more delays, things will all be predictable. So I hope I responded on behalf of Dr. Manal, and I hope I answered Hanadi's question for the time being.
Thank you, Dr. Abdurrahman. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Taha. I'm Program Director in Neurosurgery in King Fahd. One of the huge challenges you mentioned in your presentation, that the Saudi Commission covering the duties for physicians, nurses, and pharmacists, and I think this is really huge. That's one thing. Even for the physicians, the Saudi Commission playing the role of General Medical Council, the Royal Colleges, the part of the universities, the postgraduate medical education. I'm just mentioning because I'm in the UK background. So don't you think this is really a huge task to perform? And my questions about future planning, would you think there would be separate organizations or new organizations, new bodies to cover part of these huge tasks that you're already covering? Because I think in the future, you know, to do all these, you know, rules and duties, it's really major considering the manpower and the expertise and so on. So what is the plan to establishing new bodies or governors to cover all these huge tasks? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to be in a nutshell, just briefing, and probably Prof. Ayman and Dr. Abdurrahman can further elaborate on that. But from as far as I know, what's happening in the Saudi Commission is having a huge remodeling that's happening. That is, yet everything is going to be under the Saudi Commission, but having multiple core functions that are happening at independent teams under the Saudi Commission. Royal College that's in charge of training, and another body that's in charge of the classification and registration of professionals, and multiple other functions. So yet that is happening, but probably both Ayman and Dr. Abdurrahman can further elaborate on that more than what I would be doing. تفضل أبو
أنا بناخذ الثندر من الاكريتيشن لأنه هذا يوم مهم، وكل القضايا الأخرى دائما تسقط على الاكريتيشن وتاخذ الثندر. ف in one minute الهيئة اعتمدت الخطة الاستراتيجية. Our strategy was approved in November 2016, and it says clearly that the commission is going to be 3 different organizations: an educational organization, licensing organization, and healthcare work professional support organization. سميناها الهيئة الملكية السعودية للتدريب والتعليم والتدريب الصحي. وصار في نقاش هل تتبع وزارة التعليم ولا تتبع وزارة الصحة وكيف، وديسكشن طويل. وفي الهيئة السعودية للتخصصات الصحية اللي نفس المسمى هذا، وفي الهيئة السعودية للممارسين الصحيين اللي هي تصير قريبة من السي ام بي موديل، الأخطاء الطبية والتأمين الطبي والدفاع عن الممارسين الصحيين اللي بنضربوا ونطخوا يعني الأيام هذه. هذه كانت ال5 سنوات الأولى. ال5 سنوات الثانية التخصصات تبدأ تنفصل. الصيادلة they are ready, they can go out. Pharmacists they are ready, nursing they are ready, they can go out. So the vision was, in 10 years from today we will have 12 organizations. While we're doing that, that was approved, sent to the officials. It's way up in the government hierarchy now. Then the governance model in the VRO was working. في initiative كبيرة في مكتب التحول الوطني للgovernance. But they said wait, because what you're doing is planning for something different. فكل الهيلث كير الآن is changing as you know. الشركات القابضة، الكلاسترز، purchasing system. فقالوا you guys should be part of that change. Don't go and change yourself. So we said in the meanwhile we're going to do this. فسوينا شيء اسمه الرئاسة التنفيذية للشؤون الأكاديمية، وفصلناها تماما عن الرئاسة التنفيذية للشؤون الممارسة المهنية. These people are 2 different places, 2 different buildings. They're not really talking. داخل الشؤون الأكاديمية فصلنا training from assessment from accreditation. 3 different entities with 3 different executive directors. فبالتالي السنتين القادمة تغيير إداري داخل الهيئة. Once the transformation is all ready, we're going to go there with them. But what you're going to see in 5 years, no more accreditation with training. Although, last 10 seconds, a lot of international experts say this model is interesting and it has value, because now you control all the components of the thing, because actually licensing is a form of assessment. So there is value in keeping everything under one umbrella.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman.
Thank you so much, Prof. Ayman. And in preparation to this to happen, I probably I'm going to answer you from that part related to the accreditation manpower. We are working together to try to separate the accreditation staff who are in charge of physicians, surgeons, like medical, surgeons, dental, nursing, allied health, and so on and so forth. So the 6 disciplines are going to be handled by a group of accreditation staff. So instead of having one pool that addresses everything, and eventually you might know a bit about all, but you might not know all about one. So right now we are going to have staff who are more knowledgeable, more expert in that discipline than we had in the past. So in preparation to what Prof. Ayman have done, the accreditation team is going through that route. So you would not have to, there will be 2 or 3 names that you would have to contact if you are talking about accreditation for nursing. You're not going to be, oh, I'm sending the email today to Sarah, next day I'm sending it to Ahmed, and then the following day Khalid is calling me, and so on and so forth. It's going to be a very well-known people, and that actually helps to improve the accountability of people. So if you have a deficiency, you have a delay. If Prof. Ayman or Dr. Abdurrahman sees the dashboard that accreditation status for nursing is taking on average 65 days, than what we have been doing the same quarter of 2017, where we have been doing on average of 21 days or 35 days. That is where, you know, where the person to go after and ask him what's going on, what are the things that we need to go, and what's happening, and how can we address that, so that when we come to the next quarter, we'll be able to know, actually not next quarter, when I come back next week, what I'm going to be seeing. So that's where you're going to have the accreditation manpower plus the performance indicators, and that's where we are about. So in preparation to what Prof. Ayman have happening, that's what's happening on right now. I hope that fully address your question. Allah Hafidhk.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. The time is up. Right now we'll switch to the second session.
I'm delighted and honored to introduce someone who stands at the confluence of 2 rivers, the healthcare and education, and he managed to build expertise in this field, and I got the pleasure of knowing him recently, and I already learned so much, and I'm looking forward to learning more from him. Professor Kevin Weiss, he spent so much of his time addressing the area of medical education, and how can we drive it to be a driver for health quality. We could not find a better person to really speak about this topic. He is the ACGME Senior Vice President for Institutional Accreditation, and he's responsible for a program that he will be talking about, the CLEAR program, Clinical Learning Environment Review, and I'm sure there has been a lot of discussion in the Riyadh session, and I'm looking forward to more of that as well. He also came, before coming to the ACGME, he was the President and CEO of the American Board of Medical Specialties. I could go on and on, but I think his lecture will speak more than what I would be able to summarize right now. So without further ado, Professor Kevin Weiss will be talking to us about the use of accreditation as a driver to continuous improvement in graduate medical education. Professor Weiss.
That's great. Although I think I may need a moment of help of AV to square this up. So if someone up here can help get my presentation up, that would be wonderful. The just a moment. Oh yeah, you can. You'll work with me on this.
I'll see if I.
What we need is a chief resident here.
Exactly.
So just a moment of the ACGME, the American the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education. We are a relatively young organization as an independent organization, and we're a non-governmental organization that
I hope I'm opening the right one. So
is a
that's correct.
Where's that? Great. That accredits training programs in the United States. We have about, as of this year, 10,000 training programs in over 140 specialties, subspecialties, subspecialties. That includes approximately 800 sponsoring institutions and about 130,000+ residents who are actively training in the United States currently. It's a huge number of individuals, and you can see why the concept of accreditation is so important. However, what I'd like to talk with you about is how we're rapidly evolving and thinking about our role as accreditors. And what hopefully this next little bit of conversation will do is help you fold in what you've heard, both what's going on here in Saudi, but also in what you heard about what's going on in Canada, to help you think about this concept of accreditation. In order to do so, I like to start with some very basic thoughts. When I had the privilege of being head of the American Board of Medical Specialties, which oversaw all the medical boards in the United States, I would occasionally, when I met with the executive director of the boards, I'd pull out what we had at that time, which was a book. It was actually 2 volumes. It contained the names of about 700,000 physicians in the United States who had our certification. It had the certification of the American boards. And I would open up the book, and this is a book with all the names and the specialties in the year they got their certification. And I'd put my finger randomly on a page, and I'd say, there's a doctor. And I'd say, would you feel comfortable sending your family to that doctor because they're in that book, but no other information, just because we've accredited them, certified them in that case? And all of them would say, no, 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 no. We have to check and see if that person's okay. And what that represents is really the principal question when we think of accreditation or certification, and that is, what are we trying to achieve by going through this very complicated process that is not natural to what we do? We're physicians and other healthcare providers, but we still add this extra structure to make sure that we keep standards high. So here's the picture that I want to show you. I think I can move this forward. It has just two photos. One is of the patient, and the other represents, if we will, one of our residents. Everything we do in medical education training is about the patient. We train doctors not to train doctors. We train doctors to care for our loved ones, for our community, and at some point in our lives' journey for ourselves. Our colleagues treat us. None of us are immune to the need for doctors, even though we carry that privilege. So whenever we think about accreditation, it's not about training the best doctors, it's about delivering the best health care. And how do we get doctors trained so that they can be the leadership to help do that? Now, we get up every morning in our own lives. We get out of bed, shake off the sleep from our lives, and start our morning rituals. And somewhere along the way, probably grab some sort of a breakfast. Or those of you who with children who are in school, you find your way to get them to school, and then you come in and you start your professional day, your work day. And your work day is about patient care. It's somewhere related to the fact that we're trying to improve healing. But you've taken one additional step in your life, and that is you said, I want to be an educator, and you want to train the next generation of physicians, which is an additional, real beautiful thing to do in life, but not natural to our profession, and it's extra work. And the question is how do we know we're doing that work really well? Now, we know that because we know our residents and fellows, but do we really know how well we're doing, and what ways do we compare to do that? And accreditation offers us one of those windows. It offers it best if it's not a judgment to say good or bad, but it offers it best when it gives us a roadmap, as we've seen, to how we can do it better. And that's where ACGME is working aggressively as an improvement model as an accreditor, and I'll come to that in the end of this short presentation. So the U.S. found itself in a very interesting moment at the turn of last century. It does sound like a long time ago, but in the 1990s. And we started seeing in the newspapers, some of our biggest newspapers, the New York Times, by way of example, that there were medical errors that were killing people, and they were happening at training institutions. And so it was assumed that it was the trainees that was the problem. We've had a huge problem. We took it to the highest place in the United States to study these problems, what was called the Institute of Medicine back then. Now it's called the National Academy of Medicine, NAM. And a group of experts came together and said, we have a serious problem in patient safety in the United States. And we're probably actually hurting tens of thousands of people, and the number 98,000 people a year, of which we may be actually harming and killing just for medical errors alone, became the number. That was huge, a huge number. Very sobering number. We thought this was a U.S. problem. It's not. In fact, this set of little snippets came out of a newspaper just late last year, and I just kind of went to Google and I said medical errors just to see where else in the world. Just about anywhere in the world where we deliver health care, where we can talk about medical errors, we see them. And we should, because medical practice is not a science only, it's an art. And with an art, you don't always have all the answers, and the human being is a complex entity, and even if we think we have the answers, all of our treatments aren't perfect. So you're going to see these things happen. And we're learning how to recognize that and make that part of our journey. Similarly, in patient care, another important part of learning came about, and this is a man by the name of Jack Wenberg, who recently retired. But this was his work that came out saying that the quality of care differs from hospital to hospital to hospital, variations. And the reason for the hospital variation in care was not because of the patient's illnesses, it was because of the care they were receiving. Now, one of the things I like about this article is to show where it was published, because it wasn't published in the New England Journal. It didn't get accepted there. It got accepted in Science because medicine wasn't ready to hear this, that my care is different than your care, which is different than your care. But this variability in healthcare provision is the basis of accreditation and understanding accreditation. It's to say, how do we look at variability? And we continue to the United States to look at variability, and this was looking at primary care across the country in a New England Journal a number of years later, about 1990, which showed that when you looked at primary care and you looked at preventive care in primary care, acute care, such as sore throats and pneumonias, other infections, or chronic care, diabetes, hypertension, that when you actually looked and summed up whether care was right based on an audit, we got it right 54% of the time. I like to sometimes, when I think of this article, take a coin in my pocket, flip it, and say, what's the chances that you'll actually get good care by walking into a primary care office? About 50%. It's a coin toss. And this is in the U.S., where health care is considered to be very fine, and actually it is very fine. But we recognize that it can be way, way better. And the only way you do that is by developing standards and working towards them. So once again, the National Academy of Medicine, at that time again the Institute of Medicine, convened a committee. I had the privilege of actually being on the committee that published this report, saying that our health system needs to improve. And part of our health system improvement needs to be the fact that the physicians and the other healthcare professionals we're training need to understand how we can make things better, and we have to start measuring and making those as important standards and enhancing our accreditation systems. Now, just to make you aware that these problems exist, not in 2000, I pulled this out of the Journal of the American College of Surgeons in late in 2015. And this just shows you we're seeing those same variations that Jack Wenberg saw in 1970. You probably would see them in just about anywhere you'd look at them, anywhere in care systems in the world, perhaps even here. So here we are now thinking about training doctors to improve care. That's what it's all about. And we have a journey we take in this process. We start with these medical students who are learning just how to do a physical diagnosis, how to do a physical exam, a good history, and we got to get them to independent practice. We put them through what we in the States call residency and fellowship. More internationally, we call it postgraduate medical education. And somehow during that process, we have to go from fully supervising to very lightly supervising to observing and just being there to help support. This is the PGME question, and how do we actually know that this is important? So for that, I take you to a couple articles that were published that you may not know of, but they're wonderful articles. I encourage you to take a look at them. This one's in JAMA by a colleague, David Ash, who looked at training obstetricians in the United States. And he looked at the training of 107 OB programs. And he looked at the 4,000 physicians who trained in those 100 programs. Those are big numbers. And he looked at where they trained and the quality of maternal outcomes, particularly complications, and then looked 10 years later to see how their complication rates were once they've left their training and moved into practice all over the country and were responsible for over 5 million births in those 10 years. And what he showed in a very nice way with his colleagues is the simple look, that if you look at the complication rates if we're low at the training site, they stayed low 10 years later. Wherever they went, those doctors still had better outcomes. And if they had high complications in the place they trained, 10 years later, they were higher. And that difference, which you see in red there, is an excess risk of 33%. 33%, not on knowledge or technical skills, but somehow they built into the training environment that those residents came from. The programs, the institutions. That's what accreditation offers, an essential component. To know that this is not just a U.S. phenomena, there was just published, just last year, December of 17, in Academic Medicine, a look from the Netherlands. Now, the last study by David Ash was about maternal outcomes. This was about the child outcomes in birth. And they looked primarily at APGAR scores. And they found the same finding for children outcomes that David Ash found for maternal outcomes. Now, training matters, and having high quality training matters. This is an article that came out in JAMA in 2017 that showed that academic institutions, not just university, but academic institutions that have high teaching capacity, train doctors in where you see lower mortality. So quality of education makes a difference, and measuring it makes a difference. We've now come to where almost it's essential to think of competencies. The U.S. has our competencies. These are the 6 that we have now adopted across the U.S. It's also part of our ACGME International framework, which is the traditional top 2, which are patient care and technical skills and medical knowledge. That's what we think of when we think of a traditional doctor. But notice those 4 competencies below, which are a little more interesting because they're a little newer. Not so much the professionalism, because we've always spoken to that, but practice-based learning and improvement, interprofessional communication skills, and system-based practice. And it's really challenging for us to think about what those mean. Systems-based practice. I don't know how many of you in the room feel comfortable with that language. You can easily talk with me about what that means. But this is actually the new way of thinking. And of course, the U.S. system is not the only nor the best. It's just a system of competencies that allow us to begin to build an accreditation process. And of course, we've got CanMeds, which is an excellent system, and you've heard earlier from Arif some of the other international systems that are at play. So it's not so much important at this time to know that there's a best system, but that there is a structure that we start to build competencies on, and that competencies now are being built and and international conversations are being done around the world with the World Federation for Medical Education, who recently revised their standards for post-medical graduation, graduate education. Now, you've got a challenge. You're increasing the number of doctors in your country, the number of actually health professionals, and dramatically so. And we heard earlier that you've doubled the number of trainees with a target of 4,000. I think I somewhere heard was somewhere around 3,000 now, and you're on the way up in a very short period of time. And you're left with this conundrum of quality and quantity at the same time. How do you scale up and maintain quality? And the only way you can do that is if you have some very good guideposts for doing that, and accreditation will serve you well there. As you think about this quality, quantity dimension, you have to ask yourself, what does postgraduate medical education need to achieve? And the first is that first picture I showed you, best possible care, which means you have to integrate with your health systems. And you heard that that's actually the next evolution. When your health systems are evolving, graduate medical education is going to evolve with it, not separate it. It's not going to be its own thing trying to tag itself on. And then the second is to create a high-quality, accountable learning experience for the physicians who are in training. And they need to do that in the context of a healthcare team, because healthcare is becoming increasingly complex. I don't know what it's like here in any depth right now in Saudi Arabia, but in the United States, the example that I like to remind myself is when I spoke to a surgical oncologist who said, you know, when I trained, when we did a transverse colectomy, that would be a month hospitalization. And I learned as a resident all the preoperative, I was there for the operative, and the patient healed while I was there. I could be there for every moment for that entire process. Now my patient's in the hospital for 2 days. How do I teach a resident to care for that kind of complex patient when I only have them the resident physically seeing the patient for 2 days? It's a brand new world and complex environment that we're seeing the health systems move in, and we have to change our education systems to go with it. Again, this is where accreditation offers us some opportunity, because it assures this safer quality care through standards and accountability, and it also assures higher learning standards, because by using these standards we can learn and continually improve to make them better. Is this important? Well, it's hard to say. No one of us in any one country can have that, but when you bring the countries together collectively, the Global Strategy on Human Resources, Workforce 2030, milestone 1.1 is to, in all countries we'll have established accreditation mechanisms for health training institutions. Accreditation is becoming the cornerstone of improvement for the workforces of the world. So with that, I'm just going to give you a few final thoughts. The first is, it's counterintuitive, but accreditation activities have to be based upon continuous quality improvement principles. Those of you who work in quality improvement, you would easily be able to understand what I'm saying. For those of you who this concept is a little bit new, let me show you visually. I think everyone in the room knows a Gaussian distribution, a bell-shaped curve we call it, right? What we're looking for in accreditation in our mind, our mental framework of accreditation usually says, let's find the low performers and identify them and get rid of them if we can. But if you're in a system where you're trying to increase the quantity and the quality, you can't afford to get rid of training. You have to make it better because you need those training positions. So you have to use accreditation as a way to improve, not just eliminate. And for that, quality improvement says it's not about taking the poor performers out, it's about moving the entire curve to a better performance for the country, and to use accreditation as that tool. So accreditation systems are starting points for system improvements, and the reason I say that is that they're a baseline. For everyone to agree on a standard, it has to be commonly believed and evidence behind it. That's a good thing, but it's not going to get you to excellence. Excellence happens when you build upon knowledge, not when you anchor yourself just to that knowledge. So you have to think about accreditation standards as a minimum, and everything needs to be built to improve upon that. And for that, we have to think about new and innovative ways. And for the ACGME, we're very much exploring these ways. The two places we're doing so is in Milestones and the Clinical Learning Environment Review, CLEAR program. Milestones, you've heard a little bit from Arif. It's a variation on the EPA model. We now have been doing Milestones for 120,000 plus residents now twice a year for the past 4 years. It's an amazing amount of information. Every specialty we get these milestones on, and we're beginning to compare and understand variability. We're now, through ACGME International, being able to compare them across countries and to understand how progression happens in each specialty and which of the competencies need to be looked at. I assume with EPAs and what the Canadian system is doing, you'll be doing that soon as well. And then with the CLEAR program, what we're saying is, and it goes back to that David Ash article, we can't just look at the trainee and trainer, the resident and their mentor, but we have to look at the environment around that person, because you saw the data. The data says that environment is important. And so we've begun to use a formative learning process like we use Milestones, which, by the way, we don't use in accreditation. Milestones are only information we use for feedback. We will not make accreditation judgments on milestones. The same way with the clinical learning environment, where we go and every 2 years visit 800 sponsoring institutions. I've had a chance to go to some just amazing places with my teams, and all the way from Johns Hopkins and Mass General to the University of Minnesota to the University of Florida to small practices in sports medicine to aerospace medicine in the military. And we get to spend time talking to nurses, to radiology technicians, to the CEOs of the hospital, to the heads of safety and quality, to the emergency room staff, to say, what is it like for residents to train here? Is this an environment where residents can speak up and learn and feel comfortable asking questions? Is it a place where if they find something wrong, they can speak to that and everyone gathers around and says, let's try and make it better? And that clinical learning environment review program is now providing feedback to make our accreditation system better and improving our standards. And the final note, postgraduate medical education needs to be fully integrated into our health systems, and you're about to do that, which is great. You're seeing the same signals that we're seeing in this, because it's all about what I showed you on my first slide, which is now my last slide. It's about patient care, and then assuring that the doctors we're training can help us do that. So with that, I would like to thank you so much. It's very much a privilege to be here and have a time with you. And I don't know if we have time for questions.
We'll make time for questions. Thank you very much, Prof. Wise, and the floor is open for questions. So if you could please introduce yourself before asking the question.
That's quiet.
Any questions? Nothing about clear program?
I see a question, and maybe over here.
They're slowly coming in. So there is one on the lady's side.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Excuse me, Doctor, like what you said about the impact of environment on the training program. Regardless program, medical nursing, do the Saudi Commission have a view to the recruitment of the people in the different area and environment? Because I think from our view that even you have good training program and you don't have good placement or good environment will impact also on the trainee. That so how the Saudi Commission they are going to interfere with the recruitment of the people?
It's a great question. It's one I can't answer though, because it's one for the Saudi Commission. So who would like to take that question?
There's no answer. It's like the chicken and egg. I think a better example, family medicine. You want to push family medicine, but nobody wants to be a family doctor because the situation of family doctors is not optimal. So unless you change the situation of family medicine, people don't want to be family doctors. So nursing situation, so in order to improve nursing education, you need to improve nursing practice. You know what I mean? So if people are not seeing nurses being empowered, having the great opportunities, if the iteration rate in nursing is 50%, how can you create a learning environment for nurses?
But my problem, my point, doctor, that even we have graduated nurses or medical, when you go to the real situation, you will find they have difficult to recruit them. So that one will be negatively impacted on the people. When you go to, we face this one now actually in our college, that starting our trainee from nurses trainee or medical trainee to complain from that environment doesn't help them to practice what they want, because shortage of staff impacted on that training program. So I think from all programs we have, sure we have shortage in our hospitals, and we have also shortage of high qualified staff, and this one will be impacted on the preceptingship or preceptorship. So do the Saudi Commission, Saudi Specialist Health Commission going to study and to make a survey to see how is the staff number impacted on the training, or the in setting is qualified to be as highly qualified setting for training, or no, they will not interact with this issue.
So again, good question. So there's two initiatives in the برنامج التحول الوطني. One for media and for attractiveness. It's called Improving Attractiveness of Nursing Profession in Saudi Arabia. So that is an initiative that was taken by the Ministry of Health, Vice Minister for HR. So it's a huge initiative over 5 years, well funded, to improve the image of nursing practice. That's the PR part. Another initiative that we took in the Commission is working to help non-training centers become training centers. And a lot of the issues you mentioned are in that. So there's a training center that is ready. They're just missing one consultant, according to our standards. So we could hire a part-time consultant to go there. They're just missing the pathology rotation, or they're just missing this or that. But I think what you're asking is a bigger question. I cannot attract trainers and trainees in a profession that is not attractive. Just like you're trying to promote tourism in Saudi Arabia. You had to improve the situation. You have to have something to attract tourism. You cannot attract tourism to a country that is not touristy.
Yeah, and I think the exciting findings that we're having in the United States is, as we're beginning to have these new discussions about the environment, we being ACGME, the accreditor, and we're new in this. We've only been doing it for a few years. The executive leadership of the health systems, the CEOs, the chief medical officers, chief nursing officers, are finding that there's a real benefit to having graduate medical education as part of the answers. And that's very, very exciting. There is an example that comes quickly to mind where through the graduate medical education, they have redesigned one of their main inpatient units to be a much more team-oriented units. And it was the faculty and the residents working with the nurses who redesigned it. And in that unit now in the hospital, the nurses are very excited about having to have the opportunity to provide care there, and other units in the hospital want to do the same thing. So I think as we begin to look at the environment and have conversations with us, the educators, with the executive leadership of the delivery systems, there's going to be some very nice opportunities to raise up the experience in learning, at least if you see what we're beginning to see in the United States.
This is Abdullah Mulham, Program Director of Emergency Medicine, John Hopkins Aramco Healthcare. I have a question regarding the milestoning of residents for evaluation, because I know that the milestone by the ACGME is done twice a year only. And most of the residents, we have daily evaluation, and I find like it's really a problem to implement the daily evaluation on the milestoning, if I'm going to use it, that's twice per year. Is there any way to transform the daily evaluation to be accurately translated to the milestoning system?
Wow, it's a great question. And the answer is, without understanding the daily evaluation system that you're currently using, it would be hard to know. My guess is that there's probably some interdigitation that could be done, but how to do it efficiently so that it actually has meaning. The person that we depend upon most for those types of integration is Dr. Eric Hombo, who is the leader of milestones at ACGME. My guess from my many conversations with Eric and his team is that would be a very interesting question to look at. I don't think that anyone's doing it, to my knowledge, so it would be probably something you would want to pilot and see if it would be workable, for example, in one field or another, and maybe emergency medicine would be a place to try that.
My other question was, did the ACGME have any way of evaluating resident on daily basis? As the milestone, which has happened twice a year.
Yeah, and the answer would be no, because that's not the philosophy of milestones. Would not be a. There is clerkship rotation evaluations, and there's an expectation that the faculty, when they come on and off their educational activities, will do their evaluations of the resident, but not on a day-to-day basis. Now, the residents, on the other hand, do some activities that are supposed to be tied to daily activities. Most of that relates to event activities such as logging in procedures and things like that. So the milestones were not designed as a daily activity, and that's why they're only being done twice a year, although I think if you would speak to Eric Hombo, Dr. Hombo, he would never mind if it went to 4 times a year. But it's a big burden to do a milestone evaluation, and twice a year seems to be enough to be able to see at the program level whether your program is actually evolving residents the way they need to, which is different than the individual resident evaluation per se.
Sorry, that's the last thing, because part of the problem is most of the residents, they are working out, in other facilities. So they are only with us for about a couple of months or 3 months. So the evaluation part is really an important, and then also it's an issue that we really, as a program director, have to work on regarding the residency.
Yeah, and I would think that we have the same problem in the U.S. with residents who rotate from place to place. And milestones are not the only component to evaluation. It is one tool to assess certain dimensions of trainee, but it's only a part of a complete evaluation. So we have the same challenges. It's milestones by themselves or EPAs by themselves will not give us a simple solution in that. And it would be interesting, again, to look to see how we could work together to learn. I see a few questions in the back.
Thank you so much. We know that there is a lot of challenges in the clinical learning environments nowadays. One of them that you mentioned in your lecture, availability of the patients for learning, for teaching. So do you think that availability of the simulation learning environment, it should be one of the accreditation standards for learning and medical field nowadays?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think what we're seeing in the United States and other parts of the world as well who have the capacity is simulation is taking a very important role in preparing for the authentic clinical environment. The challenge is there's high fidelity simulation, which is very expensive and resource intensive, not just to create a simulation space, but to bring the people in and take them away from their clinical responsibilities to do the simulation. So one has to be very thoughtful and prioritize as to when simulation is important. The other part is what kind of simulation. There's task simulation, how to do a procedural scope, or how to do a line, or how to do intubation, those kinds of procedural tasks. And then there are more comprehensive looks at how team function work. And those are the more high fidelity simulations, all the way into, you see these simulated operating rooms where you try and actually simulate some complex moments. So as we're beginning to understand the role of simulation, it absolutely helps. It reduces the number of patients you would need to see to build up towards your competency in many cases. It actually makes it safer for patient care, because by the time you actually get to a patient, you should have reached a certain level of mastery so that when you're first contact with patients, you're less likely to have an adverse outcome. And that's good for patient care. That actually helps the care system to know that we're doing those kinds of simulations. Oops, we're still not hearing you yet.
I have a question about the accreditation process, because I am part of the Central Accreditation Committee at the Saudi Council. My name is Dr. Ibrahim Asiri. And the problem that we have faced is that there is big variation between the centers when you go from big city to small city. And based on the geography that you have in the United States, I think you have the same thing going, because there is like major city and there is a small city. How you can make the accreditations for those matching your like mission and vision of the program, regardless where the center is?
That's another great question. I mentioned very early in my presentation that we have 800 sponsoring institutions. Those are institutions that sponsor one program all the way to 140 programs, core and specialty, subspecialty. I didn't also say that those 800 sponsoring institutions are networked with over 2,000 clinical learning environments. And those clinical learning environments range from Washington University Barnes Hospital, which has 1,000 beds, to Cook County Hospital, a big public hospital in my city of Chicago, which has about 400 or 500, to a family medicine practice and clinical center in Idaho that has about 2 clinics and 15 family medicine residents. And how do our standards in the United States be able to go across that spectrum, both at the program level, but also to set the stage for the sponsoring institution? Excuse me. So that we have been working on and developing our standards to be able to have that flexibility. We are not a university-based system, accreditation system. We are a system where it is about teaching environments, and so our standards are set so that it actually can be flexible to be applied in those different types of systems. Well, thank you. That was really great. And I think the only way you can do that is to look at your standards, bring in the different types of environments that, clinical spaces, and have them react to your standards so that you can adapt them so that they make sense. We have a saying in the United States that often people say, one size doesn't fit all. It's like with a shoe, you can't just buy one size shoe. And so we have, over time, modified our standards, but there is a minimum that we will not go below. And that's why standards rest at minimum. And many of your programs are way above the minimum in terms of what you want to do. You want to achieve excellent physicians who may be leaders in your community by being department chairs. You want to have physicians who will become high-level managers, chief medical officers, maybe executive leadership in other ways within your health systems. And you need to have not minimum standards to get there. You have to, and your programs do go above those minimums. Any other questions? I think we're all set.
All right, so with that, we'll conclude this part of the morning session. We'd like to thank Prof. Kevin Weiss, and we'll start the new segment.
السلام عليكم. الآن التكريم. تتشرف الهيئة السعودية للتخصصات الصحية متمثلة بسعادة الأستاذ الدكتور أيمن عبده بتكريم مستشفى الملك فهد التخصصي بالدمام، متمثلا بسعادة الدكتورة ريم البنيان المدير العام التنفيذي لمستشفى الملك فهد التخصصي. خليكم قريب. انت لا انا ولا لا. تكريم الدكتور سعادة الدكتور سلطان العنزي رئيس اللجنة المركزية للاعتماد. تفضل.
حقيقة I have to say something. انتوا بس انا حزين عليكم والله، انتوا شايلين حطي الارض حطي يوم الأحد كان تشرفنا بتكريم الأخ والعزيز الزميل الدكتور محمد السلطان، لأنه حقيقة هو كان اللي بنى الأكريتيشن ستراكشر في الهيئة وأنشأ اللجنة المركزية للاعتماد وبنوا الستاندردز، وفكرنا أنه يكون التكريم في أكثر من مدينة. فحقيقة يشرفني ويسعدني جدا أني أكرم الدكتور سلطان اليوم. هذا الرجل اللي يقف أمامكم حقيقة هو اللي صنع الأكريديتيشن سيستم الحالي at the executive level. He has written with his own hands thousands of standards. He has done 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 surveys in all kinds of country visits. He has trained all the surveyors you have seen here. In behalf of Saudi Arabia حقيقة, on behalf of the Saudi Commission and on behalf of all the patients that you have helped, all the programs that you have improved, I would like to thank you personally on behalf of everybody here.
الآن يتشرف مستشفى الملك فهد التخصصي بالدمام متمثلا بسعادة الدكتورة ريم البنيان بتكريم الأستاذ الدكتور أيمن عبدو رئيس اللجنة السعودية الهيئة السعودية للتخصصات الصحية. الآن نبدأ بفترة استراحة، الساعة 11 نستأنف الجلسات. شكرا.